making a recipe known as holiday dressing. Now the reason I'm making it in April, not really close to the Christmas, winter holidays, is because it's that good. It's a really, really good dressing. It's just very filling and warm, and it's got lots of good seasonings. It's got meat, bread. It's just a really good dressing. First things first, you're going to need cornbread. So just buy a box of your typical cornbread mixture, and you actually have to make it. I made the mistake one time of just pouring the raw stuff in. Still turned out good, but it wasn't as fluffy as the dressing should be. So step one, get a 7.5 ounce box of cornbread and make it. For this recipe, you need to slice up 6 stalks of celery. So let's slice up our 6 stalks of celery. Now for width-wise, I'm going to just go pretty thin with it. It varies on how much you want to crunch in your dressing, but I'm going to go maybe 1/3 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch. So just work your way down, try to stay even with your cuts, and then just work your way through your 6 stalks. Definitely take off the leafy parts, and then I usually don't include the white parts at the end. And then these are kind of bigger pieces, so I might chop these in half when I'm done with them all. I'm going to go back through, and even though I didn't cut them all equal initially, I can focus now on making sure they're all the same size, because I'm not in a rush, so it will turn out just as good, even though my knife skills aren't as great. We also need a chopped green bell pepper for this recipe. So just cut it in half lengthwise. And then a good way to get the seeds out is to just take a spoon to it. Kind of pop them out. Do that over a trash can. That way you don't have to worry about your seeds, and then you can kind of scrape out the inner white parts, the flavorless white part, or you can even use your fingers, really. So, there. Okay, now chop it up. I usually just go in kind of like 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch slivers lengthwise. Oops. Be careful with your knife, bend at your knuckles when you cut. Then I kind of make sure I keep them on a line. And then I go the other way. I have to separate them into groups. And I kind of go the other way. I don't know any of the official chef's method for cutting things, maybe for a few things, but this way seems to work pretty well for peppers. So, except for the couple pieces that slip away, but then you can kind of hold those down with your palm. And then I'll chop that a few times, go at it. But otherwise, these are pretty much chopped now. The recipe calls for 2 chopped onions. I'm just going to chop 1 because I don't like as much onion in mine. So definitely chop it, and then I just peel it with my hands, peel the outer layers off. There's a better way to do this with like a paring knife and stuff, but I don't really know it very well. Oh, okay, make sure you chop the bottom too. There we go. Make sure you get all the skin off. I gotta make sure I get all the skin off the chopping board. And I'm gonna get some water on it too. That way I don't tear up too much while cutting it, because that is really painful. So, and I usually just chop it in half, lay the halves, kind of like how I cut the green bell pepper. Just do thin slivers. I'm going tinier than chopped for my onion, because I don't want it to be as flavorful in this dish. Now with this half of the onion, I can just kind of chop them like so. These are more almost diced. No, not diced. No, yeah, I would say these are diced. At least where I'm going with them. And then if you see any pieces of yellower onion that you don't want, or skin you don't want, pick it out. Trying to make sure I cut it as uniform as possible. preheat your oven to 325 degrees. My oven runs a little bit hot, so my knob's a little less than 325. Now, if you made your cornbread, then your oven should already be on. Probably a little hotter too, so turn it down and give it a few minutes to really lose that extra heat. 325. Prepare a pan over medium-high heat. Maybe throw some butter in if you'd like. And then cook 1 pound of pork sausage until it's nice and brown. Get your pork sausage in there. See, pans like this get so hot so quick, so be careful you don't burn your pork sausage. I usually use non-stick, but I only have one big enough, and I'm going to save that for the celery, onions, and green bell pepper. Now, in a separate large saute pan, put it on medium heat and melt 1 whole cup of butter in it. This is going to provide a nice bath for our onion, celery, and green bell pepper. And we're going to cook those until they're tender. Not brown though, don't let them get brown. And use a separate spoon for those. Once all your butter over medium heat begins to melt, that's when it's a good time to add in all your chopped vegetables. What's nice is browning these is not super difficult. What's nice is browning these is difficult as long as you stay on medium, because you have so much butter protecting this that you just keep it stirring and keep an eye on it, and it will just stay tender the whole time. But definitely make sure you soak it up in the butter. And as it heats up, they'll all begin to let out their own liquids as well. And they'll shrivel up. Because you know, things like celery are mostly water, so this heat is going to shrink them and make them tender, which is exactly what we want. So you're going to keep those going at the same time as your sausage. And then what we're going to begin to do in a minute is tear up our cornbread with a loaf of white bread. Now for this step, it says to use a food processor. I prefer to just use a large bowl and actually use my hands to tear everything apart. I don't think it becomes as coarse that way. It gives a little more volume. To the dressing. Otherwise, food processor, it will be fine. It will turn out delicious both ways. So put your 6 corn muffins in there. I made sure to grease my container pretty well, although I should have done a little bit better. But they're mostly coming out on my side. Oops. These last 2 were stubborn. That's okay. Make sure you use enough shortening or spray, whatever you use. And then I'm going to start tearing these up. I'm just going to use my hands, so make sure your hands are nice and clean. It gets pretty crumbly anyway. The trickier part is the bread. If you have a more stale bread, it will crumble easier. If it's a fresher bread, it may have some difficulties. So now I'm going to begin tearing up my 16 slices of white bread. It does help if it's stale, and I don't think stale bread affects the consistency or flavor at all. So just continue like this and tear up all your bread. Okay, so I ended up using a food processor. I just got lazy, but hey, that's what I bought it for. Otherwise, you can definitely use your hands. It's what I did last time. It won't be as fine, but it will work out and it will taste delicious, trust me. It just takes like an extra 10 minutes. At this point, I'd say the sausage is pretty well browned. It kind of varies how brown you like your sausage. Obviously, you want it to be safe food-wise, but this is definitely well done enough. And it will cook more in the oven too. So I'm going to remove this from heat. And eventually your giant mound of celery, onion, and green bell pepper will begin to shrink. And your butter will begin to boil a little bit. Or more so, the water that leaked out of your vegetables will. You'll feel them begin to tender up too, but it's important as you cook it to keep stirring them and kind of do a fold-over technique. You want to make sure everything gets its chance to get to the bottom, get covered, and get nice and soft. You also need a half a cup of chopped parsley. So I bought a nice bundle just for that purpose. So this, I believe it said, was curly parsley. I don't know what the difference is, but this looks a lot like the parsley I'm used to using. Half a cup isn't much, especially if you just leave it chopped like this. I'll maybe chop a little more. I might go finer with it, but probably not much more. So. If you see any large stems or anything, you can definitely take those off. Probably don't want those in it. They don't really taste bad. Some people don't like seeing stems in their food. That's more than half a cup right there. I might chop it a little smaller, but that's about it. Half a cup of chopped parsley. And now we're to the spicing portion of this recipe. We can add our herbs and spices to our bread mixture. You need 2 teaspoons of dried sage. There's 1. There's 2. You need 1 teaspoon of dried thyme. There's the 1 teaspoon of thyme. 1 teaspoon of poultry seasoning. Very delicious. You need a teaspoon of salt. I'm just going to use kosher. Then you need a half teaspoon of ground black pepper. So I've got my own grinder here. That's a smoked variety. I'm going to make sure I do a fair amount of regular too. Half a teaspoon's not a whole lot, and you can kind of vary how much you like pepper. Now we need to mix in half a cup of the chopped parsley. So, which is barely a third of what I chopped. So I definitely got a lot. Parsley's like that. It's just one of those things you buy and it always just comes in way too much. So unless you're using it all the time, it usually is a waste. There you go, half a cup of chopped parsley. Now we need to mix in our cooked vegetables with all the good butter. 1 cup of butter, that's what helps make it delicious. Or bring out the flavors, I guess is how you could say that. Then get our sausage on there. And mine's a little more crispy than I would like, but that's okay. And it says get all the drippings. So if you like meat, definitely get all your juicy meat drippings in there. And you could substitute, I'm sure, tofu or something, and it would be equally as delicious if you wanted to make this vegetarian style. So now I'm going to carefully mix all this together. And my bowl's barely big enough. You really need a humongous bowl for this. I'm going to mix it for a little while. Really, I should have mixed my seasonings around first when I had my seasonings in there. Also, warning to you, your bowl is going to get very hot. Now, to give it its last bit of kick, its last bit of flavor, pour in 2 eggs. And I always like to sit my eggs out ahead of time, let them warm up to room temperature. Although, that's more for baking. I don't know if that really matters for cooking. And then, this will help you stir it even better. You need 4 cups of chicken stock, which is just, it's a base used in a lot of cookings. So 4 cups of it, that's 32 fluid ounces. And they sell them like that at groceries. It's usually in the aisle with canned soup, I've noticed. Or close to, if you've never bought it before. It's just a good base for a lot of hearty cooking recipes. So now that we've got all this together, slowly stir it. You don't want to splash it everywhere. It's going to be a mushy mixture, and that's good. That's how it's supposed to be. This will help really mix everything really well too the final time. It's looking good. I'm going to stir it a few more times, but then it's ready. And you need to put it into a well-greased 9x13 container. So now let's get it into our well-greased 9x13. And I'm just using one of these more portable ones just because that's what I prefer. But pour it nice and gentle and watch it spread out in all its deliciousness. This really is a great recipe. You know, this is just like Thanksgiving essence. It's delicious. But, I mean, it's so great. I'm cooking it in April just because, I mean, who doesn't want dressing other times of the year? So scrape out all the goodness out of your bowl. Let it kind of settle out, but it's so liquidy it's going to level off really quick. Our oven is fully preheated to 325 degrees. Mine's a little less just because I have a hotter oven. If your oven's colder, you know, turn it up a little bit more. Well, I've got my mixture. Careful with it, especially this container. And cook it for 1 hour. The recipe didn't say to look for it to solidify or turn brown, but if I remember from the last time I made it, it does turn brown on top a little bit, and it will solidify. So, and just use your nose too. If it smells good and it's been 40 minutes, take it out. If it's still runny, keep cooking. So, about 1 hour, 325 degrees. Okay, it's been about an hour. What's nice about this is you have a whole hour while it's in the oven. I had a chance to shower. You can kind of go off to the side and do other stuff while it's cooking. You don't have to check up on it too much. But you know it's done when it's definitely darker and it's more firm. Mine's got a little bit of moisture on the edges. I'd say it's close enough to being done. If you want, you can wait till the moisture's gone. It's your personal preference. It's your dressing. I'm going to take mine out and let it finish drying up on the stovetop. And then in a minute, let's dig in. And now the best part, trying some. It's really good. The only issue I had, my oven usually runs hotter, but I forgot I cleaned it pretty thoroughly a little while ago. So it actually doesn't run hot anymore. So I had it a little bit lower, made it a little bit runnier. If yours ends up a little runny after an hour, just run it a little longer. If it gets brown at 40 minutes, take it out. But even a little runny, it's still super delicious, amazing dressing. That's good any time of year. Good luck.